Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Today we'll delve into the mind of a man who, having conquered the heights of mathematical reason, looked up at the starry sky and felt a profound terror. A genius who walked the fine line between the coldest logic and the most ardent mysticism. We're talking about Blaise Pascal. To many, he's the inventor of the calculator, or a name associated with the laws of physics. But Pascal was much more. He was the first modern thinker to diagnose our existential anxiety, our inability to simply sit still in a room, and our fear of the void. Before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narration to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of our story. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual accompaniment to let your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. Our story begins in 17th century France, a century of iron, of religious wars, and a scientific revolution that was forever changing how we understood the universe. In this chaos, Blaise was born, a child fragile in health but with a mind that devoured knowledge. His father, Etienne Pascal, decided to homeschool him. Interestingly, Etienne forbade his son from studying mathematics until he mastered classical languages. But genius cannot be contained. It's said that young Blaise, in secret, began to rediscover Euclidean geometry for himself by drawing figures on the floor. By the age of 12, without ever having opened a geometry book, he had deduced that the sum of the angles in a triangle is equal to 2 right angles. When his father discovered this, he surrendered to the evidence. He had a prodigy at home, a child capable of speaking the pure language of the universe. But the Pascal family's life wasn't just about study. His father was appointed tax commissioner in Rouen. The work was exhausting, filled with endless calculations, sums and subtractions of currency that had to balance perfectly. Blaise, seeing his father's exhaustion, decided to help him in the only way he knew how. At just 19 years old, Blaise invented the Pascaline. It was the first mechanical calculator in history capable of adding and subtracting, carrying digits automatically. Imagine the complexity of gears and cogs needed to mechanize arithmetic thought in the year 1642. This invention wasn't just a technical curiosity, it was an early philosophical declaration. Pascal demonstrated that a machine could perform operations previously considered exclusive to the human mind. If a brass box could calculate, what then made human beings unique? However, science wasn't enough to calm his restless spirit. Pascal became obsessed with the vacuum. In his time, Aristotelian physics dictated that nature abhors a vacuum. It was believed that a vacuum simply couldn't exist. Pascal, with the rigor of a modern experimentalist, decided to put this to the test. He performed the famous Puy de Dôme experiment. He had his brother-in-law climb a mountain with a mercury barometer. He confirmed that atmospheric pressure decreased with altitude. This proved 2 things. First, that we live at the bottom of an ocean of air, and second, that a vacuum is real and possible. This physical discovery would echo in his later philosophy. If a vacuum exists in nature, doesn't a vacuum also exist in the heart of man? Pascal began to intuit that science could explain the how, but remained terrifyingly silent about the why. Despite his worldly and scientific success, Pascal suffered. His health was always precarious. Chronic headaches, digestive problems, insomnia. Pain was his constant companion. This prevented him from falling into intellectual arrogance. His body reminded him of his fragility every single day. It was during this period that he began to frequent the Jansenists of Port Royal. Jansenism was an austere Catholic movement that emphasized the corruption of human nature and the absolute need for divine grace. It was a worldview that resonated with Pascal's rigorous mind. But Pascal still lived in the world. He frequented salons, played cards, and debated with libertines. It was at these gaming tables that another of his great contributions was born. In attempting to solve problems concerning interrupted wagers, he laid the foundations for probability theory. Here we see a fascinating duality. Pascal used mathematics to try and tame chance, to find order in the chaos of a dice game. Later, he would use this same probabilistic logic to confront the greatest wager of all, the existence of God. But before we get to that, we must understand a crucial distinction in his thought. Pascal differentiates between 2 modes of knowing reality. On the one hand, there is the spirit of geometry. This is the analytical intellect, the reason that proceeds by definitions and logical principles. The spirit of geometry is slow, rigid, inflexible. It works well for science and mathematics, but it fails miserably when it comes to understanding life, emotions, or faith. For that, Pascal says, we need the spirit of finesse, or l'esprit de finesse. The spirit of finesse is pure intuition. It's the ability to grasp the whole at a glance. It's what we use when we judge a person's character or when a work of art moves us. Reason, Pascal says, is forced to listen to the heart in these domains. This distinction is crucial because it tells us that logic isn't everything. There are truths arrived at not by deduction, but by feeling. As he would say in his most famous phrase, "The heart has its reasons, which reason knows nothing of." And this isn't sentimentalism, it's epistemology. The turning point in Pascal's life came on the night of November 23rd, 1654. It's known as the Night of Fire. Pascal had a mystical experience so intense that he found it impossible to describe with ordinary words. For 2 hours he felt the living presence of God, not the God of philosophers and scholars, as he himself wrote, but the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a God of fire and love, not an abstract concept. It was an experience of absolute certainty. Pascal wrote a reminder of this experience on a piece of parchment, which he sewed into the lining of his jacket. He carried it with him close to his chest until the day he died. No one knew about it until it was found when his body was undressed years later. From that night on, Pascal changed. He largely abandoned mathematics and physics to dedicate himself to the apologetics of Christianity. He wanted to write a monumental work that would convince the skeptics of his time, not with cheap theology, but by using their own weapons. That work was never finished. Pascal died at the age of 39. What remained were bundles of loose notes, fragments, and aphorisms that were compiled posthumously under the title of Pensées, or Thoughts. It is one of the most influential books in history. In the Pensées, Pascal unfolds his analysis of the human condition, and he begins with a brutal observation: man is a miserable being, but not miserable in an economic sense, but an ontological one. We are lost beings in a cosmos that ignores us. Pascal asks us to look at our position in the universe. We are trapped between two infinities. The infinity of the immensely large stars and galaxies, and the infinity of the immensely small atoms and the microscopic. We are nothing compared to the whole, and everything compared to nothing. This intermediate position makes us feel dizzy. We cannot comprehend the extremes. Our intelligence is limited, our senses deceive us, our life is brief. Pascal writes, "The eternal silence of these infinite spaces frightens me. It is the cry of modern man facing a universe without a center." And how do we deal with this terror? Pascal says we invent diversion or divertissement. He's not referring only to parties. He's referring to any activity that distracts us from thinking about ourselves: war, obsessive work, politics, gambling. His phrase is devastating. All of humanity's misfortunes stem from one single thing: not knowing how to remain at rest in a room. Because if we stay alone and silent, the reality of our mortality and our emptiness strikes us. We run towards the precipice, Pascal says, but we put something in front of our eyes not to see it. We seek perpetual noise so as not to hear our own conscience. It's a criticism that resonates today more than ever in our age of constant notifications. But here comes Pascal's brilliant twist. We are miserable, yes. But we are great because we know we are miserable. A tree doesn't know it's miserable. A rock doesn't suffer from its condition. The awareness of our misery is proof of our greatness. Pascal uses the metaphor of the thinking reed. Man is a reed, the weakest in nature. A drop of water is enough to kill him. But he is a thinking reed. Though the universe may crush him, man will be nobler than that which kills him because he knows he dies. This duality is the essence of being human. We are dethroned kings. We have a nostalgia for a lost greatness, perhaps a reference to Eden or a divine nature, but we live in the misery of our fallen reality. We are a living paradox. So what do we do with this paradox? Reason alone cannot resolve it. Skeptical philosophy leads us to despair, and rationalist dogmatism is arrogant. This is where Pascal introduces his famous wager, not as proof of God, but as a pragmatic way out. Pascal's wager is directed at the libertine, the skeptic, who says, "I have no proof to believe." Pascal answers him, "All right, but you're already on board. You're alive. You cannot choose not to wager. To live is already to choose a direction. You have to bet heads or tails, God exists or God does not exist." Let's analyze the probabilities. If you wager that God exists and live a virtuous life, what do you gain if you're right? Infinite happiness and eternity of good. And what do you lose if you're wrong and God does not exist? Nothing important, just a few finite, fleeting pleasures. On the other hand, if you wager that God does not exist, if you're right, you gain a few years of independence and limited pleasures. But if you're wrong, you lose the infinite. You lose eternity. Mathematical logic dictates that in the face of a possible infinite gain, the rational thing to do is wager on it. Many have criticized this argument. They say it's mercenary, that believing out of self-interest isn't true faith. Pascal knew this. He didn't intend for the wager to automatically generate faith. He aimed to break the skeptic's paralysis. It was an invitation to begin the journey. Pascal suggested that if you cannot believe, act as if you do. Take holy water, go to Mass, kneel. He intuited something that modern psychology would confirm centuries later. Behavior can modify thought. The machine, the body, can pull the mind along. But let's not be mistaken. Pascal wasn't a cold calculator of salvation. All of this was to prepare the ground for the heart. His ultimate goal was love. For Pascal, truth without charity is not God, but an idol we should neither love nor worship. One of his most powerful ideas is the critique of tyranny. He defines tyranny as the desire to dominate outside of its proper order. It's ridiculous for strength to want to be loved or for beauty to want to be feared. Each thing has its order. The order of the flesh, the order of the spirit, and the order of charity. The order of charity of divine love is infinitely superior to the order of intellects. All the bodies of the universe, the firmament, the stars, the earth, are not worth what the least of spirits is worth. And all bodies and all spirits together are not worth what a single act of charity is worth. Pascal died young after a long agony in 1662. His last words were, "May God never abandon me." He died in simplicity, having sold his furniture and carriages to give the money to the poor, the final coherence of an intense life. Pascal's legacy is immense. He influenced existentialists like Kierkegaard and Sartre, even though they took different paths. He was the first to place human subjectivity, fear and anguish, at the center of philosophical reflection. He taught us that science has limits, that reason is a powerful tool but insufficient for ultimate questions. He showed us that human beings are an incomprehensible monster, a chimera, a chaos, a subject of contradictions. Today, in a world dominated by technology and perpetual distraction, Pascal's voice resonates powerfully. He invites us to put down our phones, turn off our screens, and dare to be alone in our room. To face the void and see what we find there? Perhaps we'll find anguish. But perhaps like him, at the bottom of that anguish, we'll find an unexpected answer. Because as he said, "You would not seek me if you had not already found me." A final paradox for the journey. Blaise Pascal was the geometer of the soul. He measured our weaknesses with the precision of a compass and offered us a wager on hope. He reminded us that though we are dust that loves and thinks. So the next time you feel the vertigo of the infinite or the weight of boredom, remember Pascal. You're not alone in that feeling. It's simply the price of being a thinking reed in an immense universe. Now let's delve a bit deeper into Pascal's critique of Descartes' rationalism. Descartes believed he could prove everything with clear and distinct reason. Pascal responded that reason is a slave to the passions and that first principles are felt, not deduced. For Pascal, we know we are awake and not dreaming, not because we can prove it logically, but because we feel it. To deny these basic intuitions is to fall into Pyrrhonism, into total skepticism, which for him is a sickness of the soul. It's fascinating how Pascal anticipates the psychology of self-deception. He speaks of imagination as a mistress of error and falsity. Imagination magnifies small things until they fill our soul and diminishes the eternal until it disappears. Think of how a negative comment on social media can ruin our day, while we forget the wonder of being alive. That is Pascalian imagination at work, distorting our scale of values. Pascal also has a very realistic, almost cynical political view. He says that justice is debatable, but force is very recognizable. That's why we haven't been able to give force to justice, so we have made what is strong, just. We accept laws not because they are just in themselves, but because they are law and prevent civil war, which for Pascal is the worst of evils. It is a conservatism based on the fear of the chaos of unrestrained human nature. Returning to his mysticism, there's a key concept, the hidden God, or Deus absconditus. God has placed enough light for those who wish to see him, and enough darkness for those who do not wish to see him. Faith is a moral decision, not merely an intellectual one. If God were to reveal himself with constant lightning and thunder, there would be no freedom to love him. If he were not to reveal himself at all, there would be no hope. The chiaroscuro of faith is the necessary stage for human freedom. This brings us back to the machine. Pascal believed that we should automate good habits. If you get used to acting with kindness, even if it's feigned at first, eventually the machine will mold your spirit. It's the power of ritual. It's curious to think that the man who invented public transport in Paris, the 5-cent carriages, was the same man who meditated on absolute solitude. Pascal was both a practical man and a mystic. He didn't live in an ivory tower. His relationship with illness is also noteworthy. He said that illness is the natural state of the Christian because it puts us in a situation of dependence and humility, a view difficult to accept today but consistent with his asceticism. Pascal never sought fame. He published his provincial letters under a pseudonym. Nevertheless, his prose founded modern French. The clarity, irony, and rhythm of his sentences changed French literature forever. Criticizing the Jesuits in his time was dangerous. Pascal used humor and satire in the provincial letters to dismantle the lax morality of his era. He taught us that one can be profound and amusing, that laughter can be a weapon for truth. Let's imagine for a moment a dinner between Pascal and Montaigne. Montaigne, the relaxed skeptic who studied himself with curiosity. Pascal, the anguished believer who studied himself with horror. Two faces of modernity. Pascal read Montaigne extensively, and although he admired him, he criticized him for dwelling in doubt. For Pascal, doubt is a waypoint, not a place to live. One must seek and seek with groans, as he said. Let's talk about the concept of the honnête homme, or honest man, of his century. Pascal surpassed that ideal. He didn't just want to be an educated and pleasant man. He wanted to be a saint. Social mediocrity wasn't enough for him. But his sanctity wasn't that of stained glass windows. It was an intellectual sanctity, fought for concept by concept. His mind was his altar, and on that altar, he sacrificed his intellectual pride to find peace. There's a fragment that says, the self is hateful. Pascal was referring to selfishness, to the center of gravity we place within ourselves. Breaking that self is the most difficult task. It's about decentralizing to make space for the other and for God. This decentralization is what we lack today. We live in the culture of the self, of personal branding. Pascal would tell us that's building castles on sand, or worse, on the mud of our own misery. However, Pascal isn't a pessimist without a way out. His anthropology is dual, greatness and misery. If you only see greatness, you fall into pride. If you only see misery, you fall into despair. Christianity, for him, is the only thing that unites both. It's the unstable equilibrium that makes Pascal so human. He doesn't give us cheap self-help formulas. He gives us a clean mirror where we can see ourselves as we truly are, with our cracks and our light. At the end of his life, science seemed almost a child's game compared to the science of salvation. And yet he never renounced reason. He simply put it in its place. Reason is the first step, but the ladder keeps going up. If you had to take away just one idea from Pascal today, let it be this: don't run from your questions. Don't drown yourself in noise. The fear of silence is the fear of meeting yourself. And that encounter is the most important one of your life. Pascal challenges us to be brave. Not the bravery of the sword, but the bravery of the mind that dares to look into the abyss and ask, what am I? And what am I doing here? His life was brief, barely 39 years, but his impact is eternal. He showed us that one can be a giant of science and a giant of faith without intellectual schizophrenia. It only requires humility and finesse. The next time you use a calculator or a computer, remember that the grandfather of that machine was a man who trembled before the stars. There's an invisible thread connecting the Pascaline to artificial intelligence. That thread is the human capacity to process information. But Pascal would warn us, the machine can calculate, but only man can love. Let's not let the machine think for us about the things that truly matter. Deep down, we are all in Pascal's cell awaiting sentencing. We can play cards to forget, or we can seek the meaning of the sentence. The choice, as in the wager, is yours. Blaise Pascal, the child who drew triangles, the young man who weighed the air, the man who wagered on God, a life burned by the intensity of thought. A beacon in the fog of modernity. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the abyss and the light. I hope these ideas resonate in your moments of silence and give you tools to ponder your own condition. If this analysis has sparked a thought in your mind, don't let it fade. Philosophy isn't for museums, it's for life. Take it with you. Which part of Pascal's thought impacted you the most? The thinking read? The wager? Or the terror of the infinite? I'd love to read your reflections in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Here, we'll continue deconstructing the giants to understand our own world. There's much more to discover. I'm your guide on this adventure of knowledge. Remember, the heart has its reasons. Until next time, seekers.